Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting of May 26, 2015. I'd like to thank the Garden Club for the flowers they always provide for our meetings. Roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye. Or
Vice
here.
Mayor
Sorry.
Salazar.
Here.
I'm here. Aye, I'm here.
Mayor Ruane.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Here.
And Mr. Medina, Marty, would you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have some announcements this evening. The first is the 75th Annual Posey Parade will take place on Sunday, June 7th at 1 p.m. Anything on that, Ken? Okay. The San Bruno Community Foundation is conducting community outreach to gather input on community needs and interests. The foundation is hosting town hall meetings on May 28th at Bel Air School and on June 3rd at the San Bruno Senior Center beginning at 6:30 p.m. These are the public outreach hearings we promised you after our settlement of $70 million with PG&E, our restitution with PG&E. So we're looking for as much input as we can get from the public because it is in fact all of your money. They have a survey online that you can look up under San Bruno Community Foundation. There's also surveys, I believe, at City Hall and the library and the Senior Center that you can do physically and turn them in. And the meetings on the 28th and the 3rd are very, very important. The last one we had at Cappuccino had about 100 people, well attended, and a lot of good input. So it's what you would like to do with that money. The San Bruno City Council will be holding budget study sessions on June 8th and June 10th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. at City Hall, 567 El Camino Real, San Bruno. I encourage you to attend if you'd like to. Presentations. There aren't any presentations this evening. Review of the agenda. Everybody okay with the agenda? All right. Approval of the minutes of the regular City Council meeting of May 12, 2015. Any errors, corrections, omissions? Seeing none, to be approved as submitted. The consent calendar, all items are considered routine or implemented earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested by a council member or staff. Any action on the consent calendar?
Through the chair, I'd like to pull 7E as an elephant.
All right, 7E. Anything else?
There's nothing else. I'll move to approve the rest of the consent.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the remainder of the consent calendar. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item 7E, waive the second reading, adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 8.24, Section 8.24200 of the San Bruno Municipal Code relating to private sewer laterals. Mr. Ibarra.
There's been a lot of activity on this, speaking to the public, and some of the public is here to voice their opinion on this. I, again, want to stress how I believe that it's wrong that we take this responsibility and place it on the homeowners. Going through the minutes and looking at things, it's still what I feel is still a misunderstanding. Is what we have done is that we've placed the responsibility of the lower lateral on all of our residents, and the fact that some 25% have a clean out really doesn't make any difference. What it does is that there is a unknown. There is a strong unknown as to what that first resident is going to encounter when that lower sewer lateral breaks. We all know what an upper lateral does. We all know what that entails and how that repairs. The fact that for 100 years the city has been taking care of the lower laterals, and now one fell swoop we are now placing all that responsibility on our homeowners, and so I just feel that it's still something that we should encounter in the near future and deal with a plan. But I still believe that there's a lot of people in this community who don't understand what's going to happen and feel that it's wrong that the city has placed that responsibility on the homeowners.
Okay. Any action on 7E?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion second to approve item 7E under consent. All in favor?
On
Aye.
the question,
Opposed?
there are members of the public. Can they speak on this?
Yeah, I guess we can.
Or during public comment would be preferred?
Well, it's on the agenda. So.
Okay.
Just tell us your name and your street.
Mike McGurk, 1740 Santa Lucia. I'm kind of confused, and I'd like to test understanding. Has it been passed that right now, if something happens to the lower lateral, am I responsible, or are we in limbo?
Okay.
So it's a little more complicated than just a yes or no question, so let me make sure I address it properly. If I don't answer your question, let me know, okay? And I'll take another crack at it. So under the new policy that in the ordinance, if it's adopted tonight, that would mean that the city would continue to provide emergency service if you had a problem with your lower lateral, and if you have an approved cleanout, the city will also continue to provide maintenance services for you. However, if the lateral is damaged and either needs to be repaired or replaced, the new ordinance would put that obligation on the property owner.
I would just add, if the ordinance is passed tonight by vote of the city council, it would not take effect for 30 days.
Okay. So if it's not passed, it'll stay like it was. Upper lateral will be our responsibility. If it's passed, the lower.
Through
Like
the
this.
chair, may I say something?
Go ahead.
Right now, for 75% of the people, the responsibility of the lateral, both lower and upper, is on you. Right now, if we pass this or not. The only time the city takes responsibility for the lower lateral is when you have a city-approved cleanout. That's the change.
Okay.
So
I
if you,
have the approved cleanout. But
Okay.
my concern is beyond the cleanout, and now there's a possibility I've got to have the street dug up. And I don't know how deep, and there's others here that their lower lateral goes across driveways, neighbors' driveways. So that's going to open up a can of worms. Is the homeowner responsible to dig up his neighbor's driveway and street if this is passed?
if your lower lateral fails and you have nothing, you haven't already had maintenance on it, then yes.
I just hope the vote comes more positive than the last one. Thank you.
There are a lot of situations in town where there's, commingled laterals, and I think they have to be handled on a per-case basis. I think we had one on Chestnut not too long ago that was the issue there too. But for most people right now, it's your responsibility anyway. All right. I did the same thing. I had to replace I didn't have a clean out, so I had to replace the lateral, put a clean out in. From the clean out to the street is fine. But I understand going forward, and the city comes every 6 months and takes a look at it, and if there's tree roots or something, they'll do a little ream or they'll put some stuff down there and stop it. But they'll give you a notice way ahead of time if they think something serious is happening. We have also offered, not the city offered, to partner with, and some people call it insurance, but it's not, about $9 a month that would take care of that situation should it occur. So it's costing us potentially millions of dollars to do this, which is not really budgeted for. And people talk about the rates that we've increased, and they are, for a lot of the complaints we're getting for I&I infiltration of our sewer system. We're treating in heavy rain type situations rainwater. And so we have to correct that main sewer problem, and that's what those big rates are for. They're not to take care of, frankly, your sewer lateral. So we made the decision, as other cities have done, that in fact it should be the responsibility of the homeowner if in fact you have an approved clean out and there is a failure of that lower lateral. That's the way it is. Now there's lots of different opinions on that, and some people don't agree, but we had to look at the dollars and cents of it too, because it's not a few $1,000s here or there. It's running into 7 figures for the city to take care of those. So, Mr. Medina?
Yes.
Marty Medina, Garden Avenue. I'm here to speak against the change, and I wanted to clarify that although there are 75% of the people currently that where it does not affect you, or I'm sorry, right. If you don't have a clean out now, if you put a clean out tomorrow, the city's responsible from the clean out to the street. And as a former public works inspector, that's what happens. Somebody finds there's a problem out in the street. Our sewer department goes out there and says, hey, you don't have a clean out, but if you put a clean out, the city will take over from the clean out to the street. So I don't see the rush really now. Currently, from what I looked in the budget, it's budgeted for $500,000 in repairs. After this change, there'll still be $100,000 in the budget to fix lower laterals. So it doesn't have to happen tonight, but it's your choice. I'm asking you not to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Russ Steins, Reed Avenue. I'm a little confused, Mr. Mayor. You said that these raises that we have on our water and sewer are because for all the I&I that we're doing. And I sure remember here about, 3, 4 years, 5 years ago, we were in a recession and a bunch of elderly came up here and said they wouldn't be able to afford the rates, and people were losing their homes, and you guys said you had this plan because you were going to rebuild the sewer and the water system in San Bruno, and that's what was going to get done. So I don't see that happening so fast here, but I do see more rates being increased every council meeting. All I see is I sometimes wonder if anybody here knows anything other than the word I up there. Thank you.
Those repairs are being done, and we have asked Public Works for an update.
And, Mr. Mayor, through the chair, if I may, the staff report indicates that we're going to be coming back to you at the next meeting with an update on the program and responses to a number of the questions that were raised at the last meeting.
Right. Mr. Peterson?
Just to make sure some of the important points aren't overlooked, that is that the citizens of the city of San Bruno over the past, maybe 15, 20 years, maybe it's a little more, since 1986 anyway, have paid millions of dollars to be covered by this provision of the ordinance that the city would replace the lower lateral from the clean out to the main. And there's been a key piece of information that might as well be a state secret. It's so often not known by the residents who don't have cleanouts. And that is that if they put a cleanout in, then the city would take care of the lower lateral from the cleanout to the main. If that were information were simply in the utility bill once a month as a provision, then they can consider it. If they don't know it's a possibility, they can't even consider it. So I would, again, urge that you not abandon ordinance 1986-64. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
What I'd like, if I could, Mr. Mayor, is just whether you put a clean out in, and many speakers have gotten up there and said, if you put a clean out in tomorrow, the city will maintain your lower lateral. And until if this ordinance passes, the city will not replace your lower lateral, just like your upper lateral. But today, until this ordinance is passed, the city will take care of that lateral no matter what happens if you have a, if you have a clean out. What my concern is, and what the vice mayor brought up at our last hearing, is that there are cities who have proactively come up with programs to place cleanouts on properties with the provision that if your lower lateral is in good shape, then the city will still maintain it and still be responsible for it. If it is not, Then it's the property owner's responsibility to repair it, replace it, until that's done, then they'll certify the clean out, and then the city will still take control of it. That's the program that I think is what the city should be responsible for our residents. Not to just say, we're taking care of the main, and anything that connects up to our main is not our problem. Basically what you're saying. And homeowners are not privy to all that stuff that's going on underground. We've gone from upper laterals to sidewalks, now to lower laterals. What's next? How would you like to be paying for your own street repairs? You got a pothole in front of your house, now that's going to be your responsibility. This is what I'm saying, is that because the costs are getting so high, we don't want to budget for it. I think we should.
Okay. Anything else? Item 7E, we do have a motion and a second to pass on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No. No.
Okay, that's 3 aye, 2 no. Item number 8, public hearings. We have a public hearing this evening to hold a public hearing, adopt a resolution amending the general plan to allow emergency shelters for the homeless in the industrial land use classification, and waive the first reading and introduce the ordinance adding provisions to the San Bruno Municipal Code related to emergency shelters for the homeless and amending the zoning map of the San Bruno Municipal Code, identifying an emergency shelter overlay district.
Through the chair. Before we begin, been advised by the city attorney that, again, I need to recuse myself for where I live and the topic for this, so maybe this will be the last time, but I'll have to recuse myself.
Thank you.
And through the chair, I have to recuse myself for the same reason. Okay.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council members. The purpose of this item is for the City Council to consider amending the zoning code to allow emergency shelters for the homeless in a portion of the M1 Industrial Zoning District. The City Council has discussed this subject several times over the past year or so, both in the process of closing out the prior housing element and also in developing the new housing element, which was adopted by the City Council just in on April 14th. The Planning Commission reviewed this draft ordinance on April 21st, and they have forwarded it to you with a positive recommendation. So now I'll give you a brief background and description of the proposed zoning code amendment. Establishment of an emergency shelter zone is a requirement of state law. Every jurisdiction in California must identify at least one zone where emergency homeless shelters may be permitted by right with sufficient capacity to accommodate the identified local need for emergency shelter beds. San Bruno's identified need is for 32 beds, based on the biannual homeless census. And it's important to note that state law does not require the city to construct a homeless shelter, and also that there are no plans to construct a homeless shelter. This is the last uncompleted implementation action of the prior housing element, and adoption of emergency shelter zoning is also a requirement to receive certification of the recently adopted housing element by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. HCD will issue a qualified certification which will be removed once the city completes this zoning amendment. And it's important to note that a certified housing element is necessary to qualify for various housing, community development, and infrastructure funding, including OBAG funds. So 2 locations were considered during this process. First, the transit-oriented development area along San Bruno Avenue west of the train station and along a portion of El Camino Real. These are commercially zoned properties that were in the transit corridors plan area. At a Planning Commission workshop last year, residents questioned the appropriateness of allowing shelters in proximity to residential neighborhoods and also to the existing 10-bed emergency shelter at St. Bruno's Church. Based on this input, The northern portion of the M1 Industrial District was proposed as an alternative location. This area is approximately 5.5 acres. It's located between San Mateo Avenue and the railroad tracks, and on the south end by Scott Street and a few parcels just south of Scott Street, and north to Tanforan Avenue at the city border. The area was considered to be suitable because of its proximity to public transit and commercial services and separation from residential neighborhoods, with less potential for an impact on residents. The City Council had held a study session in February, received public input, and provided direction to proceed with the M1 district as the preferred location for an emergency shelter zoning. The proposed ordinance will amend the municipal code to do the following. It will add a definition of emergency shelters in the code. It will add emergency shelters as a permitted use within the industrial district. It will add an emergency shelter overlay district and a map, and the map is the map that you see on the screen there. State law also allows the city to require reasonable and objective standards for emergency shelters. The ordinance includes development and performance standards whose purpose is to ensure that the development of emergency shelters does not adversely impact adjacent parcels or the surrounding neighborhood. The emergency shelter overlay includes standards related to parking, the size of the shelter, so not exceeding the 32-bed maximum, which is our identified need, outdoor waiting areas and security, a management plan, length of stay, and lighting. I also want to note that the action tonight includes a general plan text amendment because the general plan does not include emergency shelters as a permitted use in the industrial land use classification, and so that needs to be updated. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions of staff at this time? Ken?
Through the chair, did I miss it? But what determines the size? It's 5.5 acres, and how do you determine that it stops where it stops, and then alters up the street and then goes across the property instead of stopping at a street?
Yeah. There are a number of because of the airport, there are a number of restrictions, and there's a safety compatibility zone that runs through that area, and those types of uses are not allowed in that zone. So this is outside of conflicting with any airport compatibility zones. So that's really what determined the southern boundary.
Okay. So there is a noise contour or something that goes through there?
Yeah, it's not the noise contour. It's actually it's called a safety compatibility zone.
Right.
Yeah.
I should know that.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? All right, at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone from the public like to address the council on this issue?
Russ Steins, Reed. I just wanted to say I didn't get the mailer from the city. I noticed my neighbors got the thing about this here, but I didn't get one in my mailbox, so maybe my 600-foot thing you guys might consider again, make sure that everybody gets mailers in the zones. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Hello. Deborah Adabashi. We're at 101 Atlantic at Montgomery. We are landlords and also business owners here. We have an industrial business, light industrial, custom furniture design, and there's a residence, so we have a mixed-use property. So we have a lot of questions about this project. And we did get the mailer, and that's why we're here. So 32 beds, I have a lot of questions. The capacity, the duration, the genders, the age, the date of completion, and what constitutes an emergency. These are all some questions that I have. Obviously, as a landlord, we have concerns about our residents, even though you're correct in the assessment that there are very few homes in that neighborhood, but there are people living right there. And then there's our business of concern too. We also have a concern about the value of our property and how that will be impacted, if at all. Of course, we're very interested in a shelter, but it will impact how it impacts our business and our living is something of concern to us as well.
Okay. Let me just make a quick comment. First of all, I want to make sure you understand there has been no application to put anything in. There's no drawings. There's nothing. This just has to be an area that's designated by the city by state law. So we're mandated to do this in some part of our city. But there's no application. Nobody's applied for anything at all. I'll let Mark maybe address some of the other issues regarding capacity, gender, those type of things.
Okay, thank you.
If I could interject, a scenario, because we're talking, because she asked a question as far as what constitutes an emergency. So if you can, give some hypothetical.
Well, I think what's important to know is that it's emergency shelters for homeless people. So that's really the definition, is that a person that does not have shelter. So there's no, in the ordinance as it's written, there's no distinction between age or sex or anything. It's the criteria is a homeless person. It would depend on what's a nonprofit organization or something, what they might want to do. There are different types of homeless shelters. There are homeless shelters for families. There are homeless shelters for just single men. So there are different types. But this does not, determine what that is. And
Will this be run by the city or run by a nonprofit?
No, most likely by a nonprofit.
Uh-huh.
Through the chair.
okay.
Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
I just, from your questions, I'm just wondering if it's clear, and maybe for other people as well. The state makes us, in essence, find a place somewhere in our city that we would allow someone to accumulate property and propose to build a shelter. So that's what this setup is, to say, okay, if you're going to come into San Bruno and you want to build a shelter, you can only build it in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what this piece is.
Okay, yeah,
If
that's
somebody-
not made clear in that letter. It sounded
Right.
like this is imminent, and
Yeah.
this is happening right now.
No. So that's what, this is like the first step before anybody could come into the city and say, okay, I'm going to build a shelter.
Uh-huh.
And we're telling them as a city, you can only build in this area. So then they say, okay, I'm going to build in this area. Then they have to find the money, buy the land, and then they have to go through planning, and then they have to, so that's
Understood.
the whole
Okay,
process.
that's a lot clearer in terms
Okay,
of
yeah,
what
this is
capacity
just saying-
and, the immediacy of this project, or what is
Right.
actually
No,
being
there is no,
discussed.
there is no project. This is only saying, the state's saying to us, find a place in your city that someday somebody might want to build a shelter, kind of. And we say, okay, we look through our city, and this is the best, least impacted place we could think of.
Understood.
Is that clear?
That's very helpful, thank
Okay.
you.
And other cities are doing the same thing we're doing.
Yeah, everyone has
Larger
to.
cities
I
have larger
understand.
capacity and.
It's
and-
state mandated, yes.
exactly.
So this process has to happen
so
everywhere, so.
There is no project. Right. Okay,
Great,
thank you.
thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Finale. I live on Montgomery Street. It's so industrial down there. How can they put a shelter in there? Montgomery Street, you can barely get down the street. The garbage trucks going down and everything. I don't see how it's feasible to have it on Montgomery Street. It's a very busy street. Those garbage trucks are going back and forth all the time. It's very dangerous. I don't, like you say, it's not imminent, but it's going to happen because this is a designation. You guys chose it, so we're unhappy about it.
Okay. Mark, can you address maybe briefly the process of how we tried to decide what part of the city and the criteria we used to locate this particular area?
Well, first of all, we had to be sure that it could accommodate the full number, which is 32. Secondly, I think being close to transit is an important one. Being close to services is an important one. And certainly, safety obviously is very important, and that's where I think management is extremely important. So part of our performance standards and development standards requires a management plan and a security plan that the city would review and the community director would endorse before you could open a shelter. So this area also, and then impact on neighborhoods, and there's no perfect location. So I think what we looked for was the area that would have the least impact, and this is the area that we came up with.
Okay, but all of that being said, if someone came in and said, this is what I'd like to do, they still have to go through quite a process.
Yeah.
To get this approved.
Yes.
Right, okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Tell us your name and your street.
Antoine Adabashi, 1193 Montgomery. You said that you looked for an area that has services. This area has absolutely no services. There's no restaurants, no coffee shops, no drugstores. There's nothing but trucks and businesses that are manufacturing or repairing cars, and homeless don't need that service. And they need either public transportation. There's no buses that go by there. There's a 20-minute walk to the BART station. And I don't know what services you talk about other than the trash company and the body shops. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a perfect solution. We have Safe Harbor that is run by the county, I believe sponsored by Samaritan House, and they're way up there by the airport. And their only service is Samtrans buses. If, say, Samaritan House were to pinpoint San Bruno as a potential site for a 32-bed homeless shelter, they would probably come forward and look at one of the existing buildings that they would convert, maybe a 25 by 100 foot parcel, and make an application with the city and come to the planning commission, or make an application with the planning department. Staff would review it. Notices would go out. There would probably be neighborhood meetings regarding the potential, and you would get noticed for that. Everyone within, I believe, 500 feet would get notice. And that's the process. And it is, because it's an allowed use, it would get that added consideration versus a residential area. But it doesn't mean that it's a guaranteed use. So your comments as far as safety and no services and inability for the homeless to operate there, would be taken in consideration, and they may not get it approved. So it's not imminent. It's not imminent. It is just like any other, say, wanting take for example, a auto repair shop in another part of a commercial area. If it's not something that the city believes it's, or the neighbors believe that it's, conducive to that area, it would not get approved, even though it might be allowed. So I hope I did a good characterization so that they can see that, it's still a long road, and it would have to be a significant nonprofit to come forward to lease or purchase a property to set up something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it is within a third of a mile of the BART station. It's within a little more than a third of a mile down to downtown. But it's a walk, but it's manageable.
There's no perfect location. You look at other areas of the city, and and those people around there would have the same concerns you would have, I'm sure. It's more of an industrial area, you're right. But this is, the process we're going through here tonight is going to dictate another process should someone actually come forward and try to apply for something. There's a whole myriad of things that they have to do to get anything approved, and a big part of that is reaching out to the local people within a certain radius. So you'll have your say, but there's no plans, nobody's even approached us about trying to do anything. This is just something we have to set up in place, so you should know that. Anything else in the public hearing? If we close the public hearing, you're precluded from discussing this with us again. Okay, motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any further discussion or action by the council?
I'll introduce the resolution.
We're looking, I believe, to
Oh, do we need to
waive the first reading? Right.
Move that we waive the first reading.
Second.
Motion and second to waive the first reading. All in favor?
Aye. Now on to this resolution.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. And then do we need to introduce the ordinance too, Mark?
It's adopting a resolution amending the general plan.
Correct.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
So we're done?
So the motion would be to introduce or to adopt the resolution?
We did that.
Oh,
But we wanted to waive the first reading and introduce the ordinance first, I guess, huh? Is that right? Or
the action in front of you is a resolution, not an
okay,
ordinance.
then that's
There's an
done.
ordinance.
Oh, there is?
There is an ordinance.
And an ordinance.
Sorry, the title didn't, yes, and introduce an ordinance. I apologize, I'm obviously not paying attention.
Okay.
So
You'll also introduce the ordinance, Irene?
I'll also introduce the ordinance.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Okay, so we waive the first reading, introduce the ordinance, and introduce the resolution. Good? Great, okay, thank you.
Uh-oh.
Yes, Mark?
Adopt the resolution.
We did that.
Did we do that?
We just did that out of order, that's all.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
All right, item number 9, public comment on items not on this agenda. It is the council policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any motion not agenda, any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Would anyone like to address the council under public comment? Just tell us your name and your street, please.
Good evening, Robert Barnett, Williams Avenue. I'm here tonight. I'd like to address the issue in regards to the Crossing Hotel that's going to occupy the 1.5 acreage there. Number one is, it seems that the builder wants to make underground parking, if I'm not correct, and to make accommodations in regards to making an impact with all the traffic and everything else in that specific area. And also, too, that they've been asked to reduce the number of rooms down to 150. And I see that the accessing for underground parking is not going to be secure. Therefore, then it opens up criminal activity where people can come in there and break into people's cars and everything else, number one. Number two is, I understand also that the builder, because of the site of the project and him having to reduce the amount of rooms, he's coming to the city for additional funding because of the fact of the revenue that it's not going to be generated. I don't think the city should be in there in business to have to fund somebody in regards to a project. And most of all is just the impact that it's going to bring on the area itself, and also the emergency services that, when you have chauffeurs, you got cabs, you got limousine services and everything else occupying that area. And I know there is a turnaround and turnabout over there at the other project, but the thing is that this creates another impact, I think, on the area. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Marty Medina, Garden Avenue. I wanted to thank Mayor Ruane for his donation of Giants tickets to the San Bruno Community part of the Community Foundation. It was the #1 raffle generator, and we raised $4,000 at our picnic on May 3rd. So just wanted to thank you very much for that, and thank for the council members that attended as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rico?
Robert Rico, your representative on the Mosquito District. I got 2 emails this afternoon, which I forwarded to Connie. The first one I sent to everybody on the council, but I didn't get the second one out. They were initially going to use helicopter treatment tomorrow in the Millsfield area, but I want to read the following from Dr. Cindy Peavy that came out a little bit later. We have rescheduled the helicopter treatment for Thursday instead of tomorrow. We've contacted the cities of San Bruno and Millbury and informed them. We do not have schedule yet for the rest of the treatments at this location this season. I'm going to interject here. I talked to the operations person, and he said next treatment will probably be early in July. Helicopter treatments for the Thule mosquitoes at this site are done approximately every 3 weeks through October. When we have the rest of the schedule, we will send it to you and to the city. Again, this is just larvicide treatment for Thule mosquitoes. We are starting a month earlier this year because the mosquitoes have emerged earlier than ever before. The material to be used at this time is methoprene, a mosquito hormone that is totally non-toxic to mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. It is a granular form coated on charcoal granules so that it will fall between the cattails and reach the water. All the treatment is confined to the series of pools along the freeway. No material is being dropped anywhere near homes or yards. If you have any questions, obviously you can call the Mosquito District at 344-8592, and as I get more information on the next schedule, I will be so informing you. This is the treatment that we have done, the district have done for many years. Only area in San Bruno is the Millsfield area along the freeway where there are those big holding ponds with so much tules in there that the technicians on foot cannot get in and adequately treat the water. So,
all right, thank you.
There's your copy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else under public comment? Okay, we'll go right to conduct of business, item 10A. Adopt a resolution submitting a measure to the voters of San Bruno at the November 3rd, 2015 general municipal election to determine whether the positions of city clerk and city treasurer should be changed from elected to appointed, directing the city attorney to prepare an impartial analysis of said measure, and authorizing submission of ballot arguments supporting the measure on behalf of the city council.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, this is an item tonight to place an initiative measure on the ballot, making the positions of the city clerk and the city treasurer appointive instead of elective. And this item was requested by a council member at last year's budget study session, who had requested that the item be considered for placement on the ballot before the 2017 election. And so that's why we're bringing it to you this evening. The first topic I'd like to address is what would be the reason to change the process from elective to appointed. And the short answer is that unlike other elected positions, such as yourselves on the City Council, to successfully meet the city's needs, both positions require highly specialized training and education, as well as experience. And unlike members of the City Council, neither of those positions is a policy-making role. The only requirement right now in state law for those positions is that a person be over the age of 18 and be a qualified voter in the city of San Bruno. And also under state law, the city can't impose any additional requirements in order, if those positions continue to be elected. So it's possible that the city could be at great risk if an unqualified person were to be elected to either position. Neither the city council nor the city manager could really take any action to remedy that situation. So that's the main reason for the trend we see in other cities, both across the state and in San Mateo County. Across the state, about 2/3 to 3/4 of the cities have appointed clerks and treasurers, so the vast majority. In San Mateo County, out of 19 general law cities, that's like us, only 3, other than the city of San Bruno, elect the clerk, and only 4 elect the treasurer. So those are in the distinct minority. The question might be, what are the implications of appointing the city clerk and city treasurer instead of electing them? And here's how that would work. If the ordinance were submitted to the voters and were they to vote in favor of it by a majority, the city council would then have the authority to appoint those 2 positions. The city council could also later adopt an ordinance authorizing the city manager to appoint those positions. And they could also authorize the city manager to transfer the treasurer duties to the finance director for operational efficiency. And actually, in the latter case, what's happened is, I think all but one of the cities in San Mateo County who have gone from elected to appointed treasurers have then transferred those duties to the finance director. The one exception is Portola Valley. They, for some reason, transferred those duties to the county. I'm not sure why. But in any event, those functions have been merged with the finance director. And that's really with the realization that the duties of the treasurer are well related to and integral to what the finance director is doing with respect to budgeting, expenditure of funds, and then also the investments. The one thing that won't or that would not change if the city council does put this on the ballot and it's approved is the city council would still set the salaries for those positions. So if the city council would like to make this change, how would that be accomplished? So the government code requires that the matter be placed on the ballot, so a majority vote to a simple yes or no question. And that question is, should those 2 offices be appointive? And under the government code, the 2 offices can be combined in one ballot question. If you want to put it on the ballot for the next election in November, you have to take an action by August 7th. So that's the very latest date. We're bringing it to you a little bit early, so you have some time. If the city council were interested in making this change, it's best to do it at this upcoming election, so the ordinance would be effective before the terms of the current city clerk and city treasurer expire. The packet that you have in front of you contains the resolution placing the measure on the ballot, authorizing the city attorney to prepare an impartial analysis, and then authorizing submission of ballot arguments in favor of the measure on behalf of the city council, similar to what you did for Measure N, placing that on the ballot. It's the same process. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mark?
Through the chair.
Michael?
Would it, what would change if we were to say we wanted to have each of the offices voted on individually?
So you could do that. You could place 2 questions on the ballot. You know, should the position of city clerk be appointed? Then the second question would be, should the position of city treasurer be appointed? You could do that.
Would that change the cost of the election?
I'd have to ask Carol that. I don't think
the election would stay, the cost would stay.
Okay. And are we on track to have this year be a male-only election?
So far, we haven't heard from the county to the contrary, but every city in the county has to do a resolution like we did in order for it to go.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? Ken?
I don't have a question for this. I'd like to know why, other than why. You've answered the question on why cities change from elect to appoint. We've got a 100-year-old city, and so you're saying now that it's specialized, and now that we need experience after 100 years that we should change. And so I guess my question is to my colleagues or colleagues that would like to propose this change, is that why, and what is wrong? Obviously, there's something wrong with the current situation, and then I also like to chime in as we're talking two very different offices, a city clerk and a city treasurer. So I don't believe that it should be one yes handles both, one yes or no handles both positions. So I just want to know why.
All right, I'll give you my 2 cents. I think we've been very fortunate the last numbers of years since I've been on the council to have people that are responsible and willing to learn and know their stuff. But I've read before about other cities where the same thing happens and they don't have responsible people in place. You actually have to hire somebody to do the work because maybe the clerk doesn't want to keep the minutes, the clerk doesn't want to show up, the treasurer doesn't do his or her job. So I've been saying this for an awful long time, and I believe based on what I've seen in my discussions that our clerk and our city treasurer even support this measure because I think they see the potential to cause a city a lot of grief and financial harm going forward if we happen to get somebody who's very popular but doesn't know what they're doing. So I think it's important to make the switch now.
Through the chair.
Irene?
I echo what you said. I've also had experience with several other cities that have had the same thing happen to them. In fact, a friend of mine who is a financial advisor was hired by a city close to us for over 2 years to help out the treasurer that was elected. And when that person finally said, I have to go on to my other job, the elected treasurer just quit because they never learned what they were supposed to do. So it's we have been fortunate. We have had very good city clerks and city treasurers, but it can be a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get, and those positions are getting more and more complicated and more important as we go on. So that's my 2 cents as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Rico?
So, and again, maybe it's just, again, the change of it. I'm trying to understand, too, if it's appointed by the city council, I worry about, does it become more political? If we have an election every 2 years and the makeup of the city council changes, does that mean then we easily can, by 3 votes, take out the appointed city treasurer and city clerk? There's a city that's just filed a recall, not around here. It's been in the news for some unfortunate stuff. So we're now going to have the impartial clerk who would be appointed by the city council to deal with a potential recall or elections as the elections officer. I like the neutrality. I like the independence. I think that concerns me. If the city treasurer had a concern with something that he or she felt, but it's under the direction of us or the day-to-day operations of the city manager, would they be free to come forward and say at that podium, I've got a concern? We had a city treasurer that resigned because they thought things could have been different or better. It goes back a ways, and we've been fortunate, and I agree. I do remember a time, not this city manager, not this city clerk that's here today, that it came down to the city clerk, the city manager saying, I want this done. The city clerk said, no. I'm responsible for the keeping of the books, the resolutions, and the minutes. So now at that point, the city clerk, if they said no, could be for insubordination, and therefore there's disciplinary action. The independence to me is, I do know that when they call City Hall, they get an office that is elected by the people, that person gets to appoint their deputy city clerk, and they answer to just them. So though I can understand that things have changed, and we talk about how the rest of the trend of the county is going, but we have a very unique trend where we're the only one, and that's the directly elected mayor. So to be unique, nothing wrong with it. But I have concern with some of the other issues I've brought up about its impartiality, independence, and it answering to us up here, which becomes, again, now political.
Okay. Anyone else? Michael?
Through the chair. I had similar questions, and I feel like a lot of the activities, a lot of the decisions made by those offices are regulated by the state, and so there's not a lot of latitude, for those people, even if somebody thought they could make it a political move. There's really a lot of constraints around what they do, and so I don't think it would be as big a concern to me. I think that over 100 years, the positions have become a lot more technical. With technology coming in, with all the regulations, I mean, every year there's more and more regulations that apply to these things. The financial markets get more complicated. I think that there really is a need to have more qualifications around the position, other than just 18 years old and a resident. So that's why I think that it's a good time right now to put it to the voters to make a decision on whether or not they want to move forward on this. And our current treasurer right now was appointed, so and he's been doing a great job. I don't think there's been any issues with it. Well, technically, yes. Technically, yeah.
Anything else?
I just want to point out that one of the options is to have the person appointed by the city council, to have the city clerk or the city treasurer appointed by the city council. That is just an option for afterwards. We can look at doing that differently. I agree with Michael. We've had appointed city treasurers. Well, the city treasurer that won the election that you're referring to, if I'm thinking of the right one, had the opportunity to come to a council meeting and tell us their opinion about what they felt was wrong, and did not take it. So I don't think that's a particularly strong argument for not having an appointed treasurer. As I said, we're extremely fortunate that the person that we appointed, that had to go through that just went out of my brain. Had to go through a process, a discussion process, an interview process, did know what they were doing, and did take the time to learn, and it does the job very well. But you never know if anybody who can do that is willing to even run. So I don't want to keep taking those chances myself.
Okay. Anything else, Ken? Did you get your answers?
Yeah, no, I'm listening to people from the dais, but I don't think I think it came. The request came from the dais, and now we're looking at proposing a ballot measure, and we've given no opportunity to the public. I would like to propose that we at least get a notice out to the public somehow to ask them the question, because it's the voters who are going to be affected by by this, and to just put it on the ballot and just and spring it on them for when they see their sample ballot or when they go to the polls is I think it's irresponsible to give that responsibility, to take that responsibility and not give them the opportunity. I did some research on it, and yes, Burlingame was the last city to have a ballot measure to appoint the city clerk, and it won by 356 votes. Antioch did last year, November of 14, and it won 51% to 49%. Then there's been some losses. Antioch lost. Antioch, they overturned it 71% to 29%. It was, I believe, in Southern California, La Mesa, that was a 51 to 49. Those are the three that I could find in the last 2 years. So I think it's something that, yes, let's let the democratic process go out there, but it's almost like we're not giving it the full promotion. We're just going to put it on the ballot and see how it flies. So I don't think that the voters, my opinion, would appreciate it that way.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Medina?
Marty Medina, Garden Avenue. As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, Would Carol have this seat? Would she be appointed? Would she have a chance? And taking the San Bruno residents the opportunity to run for that position and making it appointed, I think it's shying away from the independence of that position. So we've been very fortunate to have her, as well as our other clerks, and you're taking away something from the people. It's now going to be appointed instead of voted on. It's not right, and if you're going to do it, then split them up. Let the people decide on the clerk, and let the people decide on the treasurer. Thank you.
Let me just make a comment. You say we're taking something away from the people. We're not taking anything away. We're putting the vote to the people to see what they'd like to do. And there's nothing to say that, and when you mentioned Carol, I'll just use Carol as an example. If in fact it was appointed, there's nothing to say she could not apply to be appointed. I mean, that's she decided to run because that was an elected position. Going forward, who knows? Maybe she'll want to stay. I don't know. Yeah. Yes.
Russ Steins, Reed. I don't think it's a good idea for you guys to put that to even put it on the ballot. I don't think that taking a position that's voted on by the people and putting it in council members' hands or the city manager's hands is a really great idea. I mean, you guys are all great people and everything, but you all been together, a lot of you been together for 20 years plus, and you're good friends, and it seems to me that position is a spirited, free-spirited position that the people vote on it, and the people get the choice, and so, therefore, I think you guys should just leave it the way it is. Thank you.
Okay.
And while the speaker comes up, I just also want one comment that has come up is that if you appoint, then you're not obligated to fill the position with a resident. Because elected, you must be a resident of the city. So if you appoint, then you take that restriction off.
I just want to say that before I became city clerk, and the first time I tried to be city clerk was in 1989, I had an extensive background in lots of things. When I became city clerk in 2005, I thought I knew everything. I knew nothing. This job is not an easy job. It's a very hard job, and if there's a mistake made, it's me that's going to be in the newspaper, that's for sure. If your minutes aren't correct, it's me that's going to be at point. And that's where you need to have a qualified person. You need to have someone that has a background in government and understands what's happening. And that's my only argument, that I really do believe it needs to be appointed.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson?
I think the council members have made some of the best pro and con arguments on this. I will agree with the idea that the vote should be divided into one vote for the treasurer and one vote for the clerk. The treasurer is something that I would expect to have both study and practice behind them on the subject. For the clerk, I think the clerk is a key function in making information equally and fairly available to the public at all times. And my experience has been with Terry Rasmussen and Carol. The information has been that way. If the clerk is appointed, I think that it introduces a substantial political aspect into it, a concern about whether the way or the speed or the kind of information that's available is going to be completely fair. I have that experience myself now. From time to time, when I ask for information, I can get it very quickly. Other times I present what seems to me to be a relatively simple request through the formal Freedom of Information Act procedure. I don't get the information within the statutory specified time, and the information I do get doesn't really answer the question I wanted. So the idea of getting that information through the city clerk more directly, I think, would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think the people, it's not a bad idea to have the people vote on it. If they feel that's not right, more power to them. Thank you.
Russ Steins, Reed, I know, sorry, Mayor, just one quick thing. Isn't it possible to just put qualifications for the city clerk when they go to run? Can't you guys just do some kind of eye thing up there and give qualifications for certain qualifications, got to be whatever that's needed for a city clerk, and then still leave it to where we vote? Thank you.
The way it is now, well, Mark, go ahead.
No, I'll just answer that question because it's an easy one. Unfortunately, the answer is no. State law prohibits the city from imposing any qualifications on those positions when they're elective.
Okay. John?
Well, first of all, let me apologize for my casual attire. It's not normally how I want to address the council.
At least it's Giants attire.
Yes.
That's fine.
Sometimes a council meeting gets in the way of baseball. As someone who, well, first of all, Mark, you just answered my question on qualifications. Someone who's 18 and a resident of San Bruno describes a lot of us. I thought maybe we could impose some sort of qualification, but apparently we cannot. Because I do feel that understanding the difference between a debit and a credit might be a prerequisite, but and some of us who are 18 and a resident, through no fault of their own, may not understand that, but be that as it may. As someone who went through the appointment process, I want to address Mr. Medina's comment of a moment ago. I was vetted, so there was a process by which I did come to this position. I don't think it was just a name pulled out of a hat. Filled out an application, background was checked. I understood that part. I think you can, the council can put someone through a process of a vetting process. The counterpoint that I feel should be made is this. I think in the future, you could potentially put a council and a treasurer in an awkward position, should it be appointed. Because you can end up being a situation where a treasurer, who is an internal auditor at its basic core position, at odds or in conflict with the people who appointed them. So it works both ways. However, the vetting process can ensure that you get the right person in. The voters vote in the council and the mayor, so you can trust the voters to put the right people in to do the vetting process. But I just wanted to point out the potential for a conflict of interest down the road. That's what I just wanted to make clear. So, thank you.
Thank you, John and Carol. Mark, let me just ask you, we can't put qualifications on an elected clerk or treasurer at this point in time, but we could appoint a clerk or treasurer with a list of qualifications before they even apply.
That's right. You can, if the voters were to say this position or the other is appointive, then you can set what those qualifications are.
All right. Thank you. Okay, any more discussion or action by the council?
I'll introduce the resolution with the caveat that each position be separated on the ballot.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
No.
Councilmember Ibarra.
No.
Okay, thank you. Item 10B, receive staff report and consider ordinance repealing Chapter 4.40 massage establishments and enacting new Chapter 4.40 massage businesses.
Mr. Mayor, you get to hear me for the second of 3 times tonight. So this, however, is a completely different topic. This involves what I guess we'd refer to as the cities and the state legislature being involved in a political and legal tug of war over massage regulations and establishments since about 2008. So before 2008, cities could and mostly did regulate massage establishments to stem the tide of establishments that engaged in illegal practices. And the way they did that was they steadily increased the application fees for massage practitioners and establishments. Unfortunately, that had the effect of providing an incentive for illegitimate businesses who could pay cash to come in and pay those fees, while the legitimate businesses who couldn't were kept out of the market. So those regulations differentially affected the legitimate practitioners, who were often independent contractors. They might work at various spas, day spas, health clubs in multiple cities, and they couldn't afford the fact that all these different cities were imposing exorbitant fees on their applications. So in 2008, the state decided to adopt a new law and established an organization called the California Massage Therapy Council, CAMTC. And that organization took over licensing of massage therapists, took over some of the regulation, imposed educational standards, and also preempted city ordinances. So it reduced the ability of the city to regulate these establishments. The cities responded, pendulum swings the other direction, the cities responded by adopting bans, moratoriums, and all kinds of other things to sort of stop the legislature from implementing their plan. So in 2011, the pendulum swung the other way, and the state legislature said to the cities, fine, if you're going to do that, then what we're going to do is essentially eliminate the ability of cities to do any regulation whatsoever. The result of the pendulum swinging back and forth is that by 2012, the state had over 50,000 certified massage therapists. There was also a flood of schools, massage schools, many of which were not legitimate. In fact, if you look at the CAMTC website today, you'll find that 75 schools that massage therapists said they went to, 75 of them are decertified and have been found to either be not in existence or provide fake diplomas or have other problems associated with them. Fast forward to 2015, and the pendulum is now swung back toward the cities. The state legislature, thanks to the lobbying of mostly of the League of Cities, came up with a significant overhaul of the massage regulations. And as a result of that, the legislature restored the city's ability to impose zoning regulations on massage establishments. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But the state also had more extensive educational requirements, much more oversight, investigation of these schools. There was a completely new structure for the board of the CAMTC that now includes more law enforcement representatives from the cities, representatives from the League of Cities, and so on and so forth. So what that did is it gave cities an incentive to adopt new regulations, new ordinances. And what some cities did as of January of this year, which is when the new law went into effect, is they said, well, great, now we can put a moratorium on them. Now we can zone them in particular areas of the city so they won't bother us anymore. We can make them be a certain distance apart. We can say they can't all be concentrated in one area. One of the problems that we've discovered, though, with those regulations is while they sound good at first glance, they don't actually address a different issue, which is providing the ability for legitimate massage establishments to be, for example, in the downtown area. So a lot of successful downtowns have a day spa or have a health club, and those places might employ massage therapists, legitimate massage therapists. So zoning doesn't really allow you to distinguish from the legitimate establishments from the illegitimate ones. So San Mateo County tried a different approach, and that's the approach that we're recommending that you look at this evening. Their approach was, they said, let's adopt a uniform ordinance that complies with the new state law. We'll make it as strict as we possibly can. But what we're going to do is encourage all the cities on the peninsula in San Mateo County to adopt the same or substantially similar ordinance. And then what we'll do is we'll implement a county-wide enforcement scheme to shut down illegitimate businesses. In other words, forget about whether they have the light bulb's the right color or the locker's not this or that, all these sort of minor infractions that cities were trying to go after establishments for. Don't really care about those things. What they really care about is making sure that, frankly, there isn't prostitution or other kinds of acts occurring at these businesses. So if all the cities and the county were to have the same or similar ordinance, it would be possible for the county and the cities to get together in joint enforcement efforts and then shut these businesses down. That would also allow the county and the cities to use multi-jurisdictional undercover operations, which is now more difficult to do. And so that was one of the important aspects of it. Each entity would also establish sort of a unique feature, and that's what's the main difference between the ordinance we're asking you to look at tonight and what we have on the books currently. And here's the feature. It's a review board that would act on the revoking or suspending licenses for massage parlors that engage in illegitimate activities. Up until now, what's happened is that we've been relying on the district attorney's office to prosecute these cases. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes the individuals engaging in these acts aren't really seen as criminals. They're seen as victims because of human trafficking. So unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of ways to go after the business because of an individual who's engaged in inappropriate practices. What the current ordinance would do is it would set up a review board at the city constituted by the police chief, community development director, and finance director that would act on revocation hearings instituted by a designee of the police department. So if there was a sting operation and they found that some activity was occurring that was illegitimate, a representative in the police department could say, your license is revoked. That could be appealed to this review board. And that would be the final appeal. If the individuals wanted to have further recourse, they'd have to go to court. So San Mateo County has actually they've reported very good success in shutting down permanently a number of massage establishments that have engaged in illegal conduct, even when there isn't any criminal court action that they have to rely on. And that's a very useful thing to be able to do. So tonight's item is really just for discussion and direction, but we've given you an ordinance that is the uniform ordinance that the county would like all cities to adopt. The staff report in the packet contains a really detailed fact sheet from the CAMTC outlining all of the changes in the new law, and I won't bore you with those details. But this ordinance is similar to the ordinance we had adopted before, except for the creation of that appeals panel and giving it the authority to shut down businesses if there's a documented instance of illegitimate conduct, a violation of state law or the ordinance. One of the other good things that the ordinance does by being uniform is allows this coordinated effort between the cities and the county to have undercover operations that can just simply identify which businesses are engaging in illegitimate conduct and then move to shut them down. And what that prevents is businesses from shopping from one city to another, right? Shut down in one city, go to the next city that might have, by chance, more lenient regulations. So a couple of other cities are already adopting, I think you might have read in the paper, South San Francisco and Burlingame are taking their first steps to introduce and adopt these ordinances. We've heard from other cities on the peninsula that they're in favor of doing that, so this is the reason why it's coming to you this evening. The police chief does support the ordinance. He's available to answer any particular questions about how the enforcement would work. And then before I close, I just wanted to say that we did notify by mail all of the...
I didn't understand.
We're being taken over by Siri. I wonder if she should apply for a massage permit. We did notify all of the massage establishments and the owners of the properties that this ordinance was coming forward so they'd have an opportunity to comment on it and be here if they wish. We haven't received any comments yet. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mark? Ken?
That was my only concern, is that I know there are legitimate operations in this city, and they're coupled with like chiropractors and health wellness establishments. So as long as they're abiding by the current statutes, then they should have no problem.
That's right.
It's the establishments that are trying to do illegal activity under the disguise of a massage.
Right. That's right. And one other thing I did forget to mention is the CAMTC voiced their support for the county's uniform ordinance. So they've already vetted it and said, yes, that's great. That's the direction we think you should go in.
Any more questions for Mark? Are you looking for an introduction of the ordinance?
No, tonight's really discussion and direction. If you indicate that you want us to bring it back, we can do so for introduction at the next meeting and then adoption.
I say bring it back. Yes? Yes. Okay, bring it back.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Item 10C, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Moffitt and Nichol to provide technical assistance for the FEMA San Francisco Bay Coastal Study in the amount of $25,160 and appropriating funds in this amount from the general fund.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Jimmy Tan, City Engineer. The topic in front of you today is in regards to the FEMA Coastal Flood Hazard Study. FEMA conducted the study as part of their risk mapping assessment planning program to determine the revised base flood elevations and extent of the flood hazard areas for coastal communities throughout the nation. And the hazard study for various counties throughout California was conducted by FEMA, as shown in the slide. And its SF Bay Area study includes 9 counties, such as Marin, Sonoma, Santa Clara, Alameda, as well as San Mateo. Majority of San Mateo County agencies were outreached by FEMA and were aware of the study as early as July 2014. They were also invited to attend a workshop back in October of last year as well. Unfortunately, our city wasn't aware of the study and was informed by FEMA back in November, which was a little bit late in the process, when FEMA requested the city to comment on the draft maps. One of the possibilities is that San Bruno doesn't have any coastal frontage and floodplain areas in the previous mapping. Staff has been coordinating and communicating with FEMA since we received the draft maps. The overall impact to the San Bruno residents is substantial since properties located in the floodplain area will be required to purchase flood insurance if they have federally backed mortgage or loans. In order to provide detailed comments to FEMA, we came to council back in January of this year to award a contract to Moffitt and Nichol to provide technical assistance. The work included coordinating with FEMA, reviewing the technical documentation, flooding mapping methodology, and conducting preliminary analysis to determine the flood sources, and providing comments of these draft maps to FEMA. And that portion of the work was completed in February 14th to meet the 16th deadline. The city also held a meeting with representatives from FEMA back in March of 27th, along with representatives from city of our city, County of San Mateo, Congresswoman Jackie Spears' office, and the consultants. So the meeting discussed the overall timeline associated with the map development process and the source of flooding and the clarifications of responses from the comments that we provided to FEMA, and any procedures required to submit additional information for further review. This slide shows the extent of the flooding areas within San Bruno. As you can see here, this is the areas of interest within San Bruno that are indicated as being flooded. There are 3 potential identified potential sources that the consultant has determined that impacted this area. The first is the navigable slough, the second is the tide gate structure, and the third is the airport levees. As for the navigable slough, it's located within the South San Francisco area. It is like the arm to the Coma Creek channel there. The south bank of the slough is lower than the elevation of what FEMA had determined as their base flood elevation. So the water eventually overtops that south bank and flows down from South San Francisco towards Shaw Road into San Bruno. The other is the tide gate structure. The tide gate structure is at the end of the San Bruno Creek near the SFO Airport and United Airlines building there. and it prevents, water from coming back in from the bay. But since the tide gate structure is non-accredited, according to FEMA, that's not taken into account as part of the analysis. So the water does flow through that area into the San Bruno Creek and floods San Bruno. The third source is the flooding from the airport levees that's around the perimeter of the San Francisco airport. The airport levees are non-accredited, and again, according to FEMA's methodology, these non-accredited structures are not taken into account in their analysis, and it's used as it just overtops these areas. The staff spoke to the airport. There's substantial improvements that needs to be done on these levees, and it's currently in their 10-year CIP for these improvements. These sources of flooding can be mitigated through a process to revise these flood maps, but it requires a detailed study to be provided to FEMA, and staff is currently interested in developing additional hydraulic analysis that provide more detailed information. FEMA's current hydraulic model to analyze this coastal flooding is based on what we call a steady state model, which assumes like an infinite amount of water that's coming in, and then within an infinite duration. FEMA considered, a static elevation of 10.4 feet in our area in their analysis, and anything that's below 10.4 feet is flooded. So the new analysis, the two-dimensional model, will provide a better understanding of this coastal flooding in this region, and whether any of the flooding can be reduced within this neighborhood. The new model will take into account the duration of the tide, the time of the tide, and the volume of the water that's coming in, and possible any storage in these low-lying areas. The results from the technical analysis will be, provided from the city. Will provide the city with a better understanding to make an effective appeal to FEMA to support a map amendment if the analysis shows the area of inundation is reduced. Upon completion of the analysis, staff will also discuss the results and appeal to FEMA to change the maps. The remaining schedule, FEMA completed all the tasks up to June 2015, when the preliminary flood insurance rate maps will be released. Once that gets released, FEMA would then hold a public outreach with communities to explain the changes to these maps and answer any questions. The 90-day appeal period, if we do consider appealing, it's between October to January. Then FEMA will issue a letter of map determination, and then the compliance period begins, where agencies must adopt a floodplain management regulations and adopt new ordinances for building codes. The new rate maps will be effective starting around September 2016. Then the flood insurance will be required for the residents starting at that time. So to proceed with the detailed analysis, staff is recommending to adopt the resolution for this contract to Moffitt & Nichol to provide the technical assistance.
Any questions for staff? Ken?
How many properties are we talking about?
Estimated to be about 460 properties.
And these are primarily residential properties in the location that's colored on the map.
Anyone else? Irene?
Thank you. One of the things that we learned at the FEMA conducted meeting was about the flood insurance, and if people in that area are concerned, they should talk to their house insurance people before. And I'm sorry, I can't. Jimmy, do you remember if you get flood insurance before it's required, it's usually much less, and then it only increases if at a certain percentage up to a top level. But if you get it and turns out you don't need it, you can cancel it. So I think we need to do some kind of information about that. It's a crucial part for people who have federally backed mortgages in that area. It's generally our low-income area. There's a lot of renters there. I'm really concerned about the people. And if the homeowners have to pay more for this flood insurance, the renters are going to be suffering as well. So I'm not sure what the best way to do that is, but it's something we need to do.
If I could respond briefly to that. So the outreach, if you could go to the next slide, Jimmy. FEMA intends to begin public outreach shortly after the maps are released the preliminary maps are released in June. So the period between July and July, August, September is a very important public outreach opportunity, which will allow for the provision that you've mentioned based on our understanding of the FEMA requirements. There is a little bit of does present a little bit of a conundrum, because we are then potentially, depending on the information we would get from the additional technical analysis, wanting to consider the submittal of an appeal. And then those periods are going to overlap. So we will not know whether we have the basis for an appeal and whether that appeal will be successful. We will not know that before homeowners, renters need to become aware of the potential for the flood insurance requirement. And as you said, the earlier you get it, our very limited understanding about the insurance-related aspects of this issue is exactly as you said, that if homeowners apply and obtain the insurance early, there may be an opportunity for a discount. However, they would be in the odd position of having to do that before we know whether there's a potential for the map to be revised.
Yes, so that's the conundrum. Right. And I'm not really excited about how accurate or how diligent FEMA is about notifying people, since they were negligent in notifying us about all these meetings for over a year. So I'm sure we can work out something that we let people know without scaring them to death, but I think the more people, the sooner people know, the better, is my opinion. So
absolutely.
I think we can work something out.
What concerns me is that no one wants to be in a floodplain. No one wants to be in that zone. My experience as a design professional is that parts of east sides of San Mateo and Palo Alto have big concerns. There's been big hearings and a lot of concern from the residents, and even community development departments have had to change their guidelines. And it's a blemish on those properties, and it's paying for flood insurance is one thing, but if the property value goes down because of that, I think we need to advocate for those residents. And being 400 plus residents, we should really make sure that FEMA is doing their best to do the technical aspect of it. It concerns me during the staff report, when you say that a lot of these measures are uncertified, so they're not giving it possibly the full benefit of stopping a flood or containing a flood. What does that mean? So then when they decertify measures at the airport, does it make it freely that it goes into San Bruno, because they're not giving it the benefit that that's due. So I think if we live there, and I know Councilman O'Connell has family in that area and stuff, and that's the area, the Bel Air district, and we need to advocate for that community to make sure that they don't get the short end of having to deal with flood insurance and those aspects. Thank you.
Anyone else? Action by the council?
I'd like to introduce the resolution.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Final item 10D, authorize the city manager to enter into a second exclusive negotiating rights agreement with OTO Development, LLC.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'll be delivering this report, and the city manager will be available to answer questions and make comments as appropriate. So this item represents the next step in the development of and construction of a select service hotel on the remaining crossing site. A little bit of history. The City Council has been very interested for many years in bringing a new hotel to that site, and not just for visitors who might be rushing to and from SFO, but also for residents and families who live here in our community. The City Council's vision was that that hotel would provide about 3,000 square feet of conference space and banquet space for banquets, meetings, parties, and events that members of the community could take advantage of if they wished. Unfortunately, the site itself is relatively small, and the size of the hotel that can be built there, which is only about 140 to 150 rooms, is much smaller than what was originally envisioned for a larger site. A luxury, full-service, 500-room hotel was originally envisioned there. But unfortunately, those smaller hotels, the select service ones of 140, 150 rooms, generally only find it economical to provide meeting space that's in the 1,000 to 1,500 square foot range. So not very much, and certainly not enough for a large banquet or birthday party or anniversary. So what that meant is, with a desire by the City Council to have the hotel be a community asset, is it meant fewer rooms possible for the hotel. Well, fewer rooms means less revenue for the hotel. And in addition to that, because the site is very small, there's not enough room above ground for all the required parking. And so now the developer has to dig and provide very expensive underground parking to provide what's required by the city. So as a result of that, it became apparent that what the city needed and wanted for its community and its residents might not be economically feasible for a private developer to fund 100% of. So the solution to consider was to think about some amount of public participation to ensure that a relatively small hotel could be built within these constraints, the size of the lot, the parking, and the community meeting space, while also providing a relatively large meeting space for residents. So in 2012, the city issued a request for proposals, went through an extensive vetting process to pick a developer, and they selected OTO. And at that time, shortly thereafter, you authorized the city manager to negotiate what's called an exclusive negotiating rights agreement. And that was the agreement that I guess I would say launched the development of the hotel. And so a lot of things have been accomplished since that time, as we detailed in the staff report. The EIR, the draft EIR, is now completed and out for public review. We're all very excited about that. There's been a lot of significant site work and planning for the property. Drawings have been prepared, and then OTO also obtained confirmation for the Marriott flag, which was an important aspect. In the meantime, the city hired its own independent economic consultant to evaluate what level of public participation would be necessary and what is the minimum level of public participation necessary for this hotel to be built. And what they came up with was a number of about $3.896 million. And that was based on the fact that the site was small, underground parking would be required, additional meeting space was desired, and then plus, if there's anything more than an insignificant subsidy amount from the city, it triggers a prevailing wage requirement. So that increased the construction costs. So that $3.9 million approximately includes the land, which the city currently owns, and it'd be proposed that the land be transferred to them. Waiver of some permit fees in the amount of about $650,000, and about 2 years' worth of a transient occupancy tax holiday. In other words, the hotel wouldn't pay TOT for about 2 years, and that's another $1.7 or $8 million. The independent consultant also confirmed that starting when the hotel was finished, the city would get significant economic benefits in the amount of about $850,000 a year for the life of the hotel. And that includes new property tax, TOT, once the 2-year holiday is over, and then sales tax on their operations. So if you do the math, it ends up that within about 5 years of the construction of the hotel, the city would break even. That's what the economic consultant's report told us. And the city council previously reviewed that information, and then staff had discussions based on your direction with OTO, based on that direction, and that was an amount that they felt would make the hotel economically viable. So tonight, we're recommending, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing, which is that the consultant also recommended that once the hotel is built and you know what the room rates are, what the occupancy is, what the construction costs are, that the amount of any subsidy that the city were to offer be trued up, so to speak, so that that way, if the hotel is wildly more successful than the economic model predicted, that there would be potentially either a refund of some of those funds, or that you wouldn't have to pay for as long as, rebate for as long as 2 years on the transient occupancy tax. So tonight what we're doing is requesting that you provide the city manager with authority to enter into a second exclusive negotiating agreement. The first one's expired by its own terms. The parties knew that, understood that, didn't have a problem with it because the project was proceeding. But the new ENA would include these basic terms that we've talked about, and it would authorize the city manager to then move forward and negotiate what's called a DDA, a disposition and development agreement. That's what's going to come to you for final action sometime in the fall, and that has to be vetted at the public hearing, and there's other approvals that are required for that. But in the meantime, we think it would be a good idea, give the developer a little more certainty, give the city a little bit more certainty in the process as it moves forward to authorize the city manager to negotiate the basic terms of this, recognizing that they're all subject to not only your final approval, but also the final results of the environmental impact report and other development approvals that'll be needed. So in a nutshell, that's the request for tonight, and the city manager and I are happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff at this time?
Through the chair.
Michael?
On the statement in the report that says that the tax holiday could be adjusted, could you dig a little deeper into the language that would be in the agreement?
We will. We can't tonight. And the reason for that is because this is sort of the first effort that we will have made with the developer to negotiate those terms. But what the consultant has recommended is something along the following lines, that they would provide us at the conclusion of construction, then we would agree on some period of time that they could be in operation, that they would provide us with documentation of all the construction costs and as well as occupancy. They have to do that anyway for business license tax purposes. So they would provide us with all of that information. And there would be a second go around by one of the consultants to true those numbers up and say, well, the hotel cost a little more to build than you anticipated, but on the other hand, the room rates were higher than we modeled and the occupancy was higher. So it's a wash. Or it comes out to be somewhat in the city's favor. It's possible it could come out to be in the hotel's favor. But that's something that we'd have to work on, and it would come back to you in any event for review and approval.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Ken?
What if the property sells? Is there a chance that they could sell it? Every property in that development has sold and experienced a large profit. So are we locked into the Marriott brand? And so if it stays with that name, are they capable of selling it to other investors or something as long as they keep that brand? And if they make a large profit, say they're just lurking out there and they see that the success is building or whatever, and they like the location and it's booming, and so they pay off whatever the complaint was that they've invested, or the argument that they've invested in, and all of a sudden, they've made tidy profit on the project. Do we
Yeah,
have it out?
That's an excellent point, Councilmember Ibarra, and that's something I think our economic consultants would say that we should share in that what they refer to as a home run. So if they get some sort of windfall as a result of that, we should get part of that grand slam. Thank you for pointing that out.
Anything else? Action by the council?
Just get comments?
No. All right.
Marty Medina, Garden Avenue. I find it amazing with property values, the way they're skyrocketing, that is it $1 that we're selling at the property? $1. So we're going to get the money back in 5 years, that the $4 million that we're forgiving or waiving. But we don't have the property. It's no longer ours. How much is that property worth? And who hired who's this person, this independent consultant that we hired? And did the developer ask for the money first, or how did that relationship develop? That we are out hiring somebody, and how much did it cost for us for that consultant to tell us that we need to give away $4 million?
I would just like to say that we've been dealing with this more than 3 years. We've been dealing with this for almost 10 years, and being on the subcommittee, yes, there is an education on how we invest, and this council and subsequent councils have wanted to have this flagship, this hotel, this amenity in the city, and we knew that there would be an investment. And when the developers, the previous property owners said, we need out, we don't want to, we don't want to look for another hotel, we don't want to develop it, it's yours. And so we purchased it, and I believe we purchased it for a song at $1.4 million. And so we had every intention of using it as leverage because of redevelopment going away. So this is creative financing, in my opinion, at the best. And to get what we want without putting up another office building, without putting up more apartments, this is something that San Bruno does not have. And I think this is, with the economy the way it is, it'll probably pay off even faster than 5 years. So I think it's a very prudent and very smart decision that we've pursued in this.
I agree. We had some real issues with trying to get people, in fact, in the little strip where Jack's is now. We had a lot of people interviewed and stuff. Nobody take us up on it because we didn't fit into their cookie cutter. We had some local people, for instance, the people that own Jack's, the Marcovisis, come to us and say, we're local, we want to do this. We had the big plot of land left there. The developer didn't want to do anything with it. He just wanted to unload it. We got it for a very cheap price. And it is, in fact, our opportunity to go forward and work something, as Ken said, creative financing, to get what we wanted. Because we promised this community a hotel, some place that they could actually use themselves with some meeting space, so that there's nothing in this city where somebody could have a wedding, a christening, a meeting, and we promised that to the community, and I'm determined to give it to them. We have a hotel management company that wants to build right there. It's a nice design, underground parking, costing them a fortune, but I think it'll be a real gem for this city. It's the last big piece of developable land that we have. So, Irene?
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that we had a specific plan that we developed through the advisory board of people in the community, and that plan went on the ballot, and that people voted for it. And part of the big piece of that was a hotel that had the meeting rooms and a room for holding your wedding or your anniversary party or whatever. So it wasn't just us sitting up here saying, yeah, that's what we want. It really came from a long line and a long time of people giving us their input.
If I could add, OTO, what we've learned, is a very reputable and very successful developer of hotels, and especially Marriott brand hotels.
Okay. Any other comments or action by the council?
So with that, I'll approve it. Or
So this would be a motion
move to approve the city manager, move to authorize the city manager to enter into a second exclusive negotiating rights agreement with OTO, with provisions as said.
I'll second the motion.
Motion is second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 11, report of commissions, boards, and committees. There aren't any this evening. Item 12, comments from council members. Anyone have anything? Item 13, closed session. We had a closed session before the meeting, and we're going to adjourn until June 9th right here.